It's been nearly a year since AMD debuted its AM5 platform and the Ryzen 7000 series to the market. This new AM5 platform was touted as an absolute game changer for the CPU industry, and well, it looks like things haven't gone quite in the direction AMD had hoped they would. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing new additions to a 6-year-old platform. Let's discuss that in this new video. Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video. Hey, what is going on guys? Danny here. Welcome back to the channel and I hope you've all been doing well. I can't believe just how fast a whole year flies by. They say that as you get older, the years just seem to go by quicker, and I can definitely attest to that now. Last year in August, AMD unveiled the Ryzen 7000 series and their latest AM5 platform. I had made an impressions video expressing my disinterest where I said they're not really that exciting enough to entice gamers to switch or adopt AM5, and that AMD will have a tough time selling the CPUs at those announced prices. I was absolutely flamed for that video. I was told I had no idea what I was talking about, and the 7000 series would be selling like hotcakes. That obviously didn't end up happening, and we're going to discuss various reasons as to why that was, and also discuss some recent developments that have happened in the CPU market, which makes the whole situation pretty interesting. Before that, I just wanted to hop on over to newegg.com, take a look at their CPU category, and sort by their best sellers. I have sorted by sold and shipped by Newegg, so we're not getting results from third parties. The top 3 CPUs are Ryzen 5000 series, followed by the 13900K. I'm actually quite surprised to see that because for the vast majority of users, the 13900K is so overkill, but hey, if you want the best Intel CPU, then that is the one to get. Me personally, I find the 13700K is a lot better value for gamers. Now in the number 5 spot, we have the 7800X3D, which is the latest AM5 CPU to hit the market, which is pretty good. The 7800X3D is a nice CPU. It'll give you performance that's on par, if not better than the 13700K in gaming, though that is dependent on the types of games you're playing, and this thing is really efficient. But after that, we have more 5000 series parts, and a couple of Intel parts with the 7950X3D hanging around on the 11th spot. So the top 10 being dominated by last gen 5000 series parts, and I'm sure you guys know where I'm going with this, but let's move on to another site, Amazon, who are a larger retailer than Newegg. Over at Amazon.com, the situation is very similar. We're again seeing the top 10 spots being dominated by last gen Ryzen 5000 series, and also Intel's 13th gen and 12th gen parts. What's interesting is that the 13900K didn't even get that many positive reviews. It was touted as barely being faster than the 13700K in gaming and was ridiculed for being power hungry. Despite that, it seems to be doing fairly well in the market, and the fact of the matter is, love it or hate it, the 13900K is the enthusiast CPU. If you want to overclock, tune, and if you want to play around with fast memory, then it's the CPU to get. Head on over to a forum like overclock.net, you'll see the 13900K is what most of those guys there are using or playing around with. Now, circling back to AMD, we're seeing the 7800X3D is listed here on the 11th spot, being the best seller from the 7000 series, with the rest of the parts in lower spots. What this signifies to me is that so far, AM5 and the 7000 series have been somewhat of a flop, and they didn't sell like hotcakes. Now, a lot has changed over the past year compared to their initial launch prices. The 7000 series are considerably cheaper. In fact, we had started to see pretty drastic price drops for the series just a couple months later. Right now, you can pick up a 7700X for around $300, and the CPU has dropped below that as well. You can buy the 7950X for less than $600, but what's also interesting is that you can buy the 7950X3D for less than that with this coupon that gives you $70 off. And the 7950X isn't even that old. I believe it came out just about 5 months ago, and the fact that it's already this cheap says a lot. At this point though, I'm not sure why anyone would get the non-3D parts since they're cheaper. Your multi-core performance is going to be a bit worse, sure, but gaming performance is significantly better. In my opinion, if the plan was to release 3D parts all along, then AMD probably shouldn't have bothered with some of those non-X parts, because now what's going to happen is they're just going to end up getting cannibalized by their own other parts. There are also non-X lower TDP parts that were introduced, and they seem attractive at first because they were cheaper than their X counterparts, but now not so much. You can buy a 7900X for cheaper than a 7900. At that point, there's no reason for the 7900 non-X to exist. DDR5 RAM pricing, compared to where it was a year ago, has also taken a dramatic nosedive. A 32GB 6000 memory kit would sell for like $250 to $300, and now you can find it for less than $100. DDR5 pricing is basically on par with DDR4 pricing, and from what I'm hearing, prices are still expected to drop further, which is good for everyone and new system builders. Motherboard pricing is still pretty whack though, and the situation solution here hasn't really improved all that much. It's been one of the biggest reasons as to why people haven't adopted AM5. When they see that the AM4 equivalent board was $100 cheaper, or you can get a Z690 board that will easily run a 13900K with overclocked memory for less than $200, that definitely makes it appealing for buyers to take that route instead. Now, since we're talking about AM4, this platform is still alive and kicking, and the reason for that is because when it comes to performance, the Ryzen 5000 series is still very competent for the vast majority of users. I'm talking mainly from a gaming perspective. When you've taken a look at the recent benchmarks for new CPUs, a lot of those tests were done by reviewers using a 4090 or 7900 XTX at 1080p to showcase the differences. But in a market where the vast majority are using X60 class cards, a 5600X or a Ryzen 5 5600 is more than capable for their needs. When you can buy a Ryzen 5 5600 for $140, 16GB 3600 megatransfers RAM for $50, a $100 motherboard versus AM5, which will cost you about another $200 or so, for performance you might not even be taking advantage of. That definitely makes it kind of a hard sell. On top of that, for those that did need the extra performance, a lot of them just ended up dropping in a 5800X 3D and called it a day. That CPU has dropped down to $280, I believe, which is a pretty good deal. Now, with that said, given the current pricing of the 7000 series and DDR5, I am on the side that says that if you are building new, like you don't have anything else beforehand, you're not upgrading from AM4, it doesn't make sense to buy AM4 because it's a dead platform. But for those users who are using something older than the Ryzen 5000 series, and let me remind you, we've had 3 different generations prior to the Zen 3, so that's a huge user base. A lot of those people are going to be upgrading, and they're going to be interested in just dropping in a 5000 chip instead of doing a whole platform upgrade or overhaul. After all, AMD did advertise AM4 longevity and easy upgrade path as a selling point. This leads me into what prompted me into making this video, and that was the addition of new Ryzen 5000 parts. More specifically, I wanted to talk about AMD releasing a Ryzen 5 5600X 3D. Now, this launch definitely intrigued me because I personally thought at first, what incentive would AMD have to release this part? However, as we just saw with the popularity in 5000 parts and AM4, it's a platform that isn't going to be going away anytime soon, and if AMD has defective X3D parts that they can utilize, they might as well release this and sell it to the gamers that want it. I've taken a look at some of the benchmarks. GN did a review of it and found it performs similarly to the 7000 series, which is pretty darn good if you ask me for a simple drop-in upgrade. The issue is that the 5600 X3 was a very niche release. It was only released in the States and at micro centers. I'm not even sure if all locations had them. On top of that, as mentioned earlier, if you're not gaming at 1080p with a 4080 or 6950 XT or greater, then you're probably not going to notice the difference. Nonetheless, it's interesting to see AMD continuing to release AM4 CPUs, and I think it's because they've come to the realization that right now, they just don't have much to entice the huge user base to jump to AM5. The general consensus I've gotten is that unless it's a new generation that can offer like 40% plus better performance than the 5000 series, they really have no interest in switching. Also, going back to what I said earlier, if someone is on an older CPU like the Ryzen 7 1800X or Ryzen 5 2600 and they're like, hey, you know what, I've got the upgrade itch, perhaps it's time for a change and to get better performance, they can upgrade to a 5800X 3D, for example. That right there is a huge upgrade, at least 40%, easy. It's cost effective and they don't have to change their motherboard or RAM. Guys, AM4 is here to stay for a long while, and it's not going to be going away anytime soon, not unless there's a giant leap with Zen 5 or some new revolutionary must-have feature. Now, moving on, and I wanted to briefly talk about a leak surrounding an upcoming Intel CPU. As you guys might have heard, Intel aren't going to be releasing a brand new architecture for their upcoming desktop series. Instead, what they're going to be doing is basically a refresh of Raptor Lake, which was a refresh of Alder Lake. Essentially, the same sort of improvements we got with Raptor Lake is what you can expect to see with Intel's 14th gen. So more cores for the lower end SKUs, maybe a bit more cache, and then probably some higher clocks out of the box. So performance should be around, 5 to 10% at best. Now, recently there were some leaked benchmarks for what is allegedly the i7 14700K CPU. This info comes from video cards who are sourcing some leakers from Twitter. Here they showed a screenshot of the CPU's results from Cinebench R23 and CPU-Z benchmark. In Cinebench, it scored 2,192 points, which is a decent score out of the box, and this could be just an early engineering sample, so perhaps single core performance could be a little bit higher if they aren't reaching their full clocks just yet. I have been able to get a higher score on my 13700K, but that was through overclocking and tuning. Now, in regards to multi-core score, here they show an increase of 18.2%, which is a decent leap, but the reason for this is because it seems like Intel will be increasing the amount of E-cores with this CPU. The margins are also very similar with CPU-Z benchmark. Where the 13700K had an 8+8 configuration, the 14700K will come with 8 performance cores and 12 E-cores, with a total thread count of 28. For those saying, I don't care about E-cores, well, I highly urge you guys to check out my benchmarks where I tested 40 games on my 13700K with E-cores on and off, and the results are pretty eye-opening. With that said though, I wouldn't expect a huge performance leap from these 14th gen CPUs when it comes to gaming over the 13th gen, and I don't think these performance increases would be enough to entice 12th gen owners. Though if you're someone who's in that niche category that needs every frame they can get, might be worth looking into, but for the vast majority of users, Intel is basically going to be running into the same sort of scenario or problem that AMD is running into, where previous gen parts are just a lot better value. Chris from the Good Old Gamer YouTube channel, definitely recommend checking him out. He recently talked about a great deal where he spotted the 12700K, so the Alder Lake i7, that was on sale at Newegg for around $230. That right there is impeccable value. Just buy that, pair it with some good DDR4 RAM, B-die memory, get a $150 motherboard, overclock it, tune it, do whatever, and you'll have a processor that's going to be competing with some of the best out there. And like I said, unless you're running like a 4090 overclock balls to the wall, then you really don't need to be worrying about all that much performance from the CPU. Harukaze does also note that there is an increase in cache, but it's not a huge amount. I just hope that they can do something about that power. Like, unless you're going to be running with power limits or undervolting, then you should be prepared to have a 360mm rad minimum. What is appealing though is that I'm hearing that these 14th gen CPUs will be compatible with 600 and 700 series boards, since they're going to be on the same socket. So it'll be the first time in quite a while, or perhaps it's the first time, where Intel will be supporting 3 generations on one socket. Guess they took that page out of AMD's book and saw how beneficial it was. But all in all, I will be looking forward to how these CPUs turn out, and I'll most likely pick one up for testing. Well, that'll do it for this one, guys. We'll touch base in the next video. If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.